Now with Brit, Mara, Charles, and Juan. So congressional Democrats are trying again to force the president's hand on Iraq. The House passed, but the Senate defeated a $50 billion measure to fund the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, but with some strings attached, linking it to withdrawals of U.S. troops from Iraq. Now, Brit, despite complaints from the Pentagon, the Democrats say they are not going to look at these money bills again until sometime next month. When does this actually affect the troops on the front lines, and do you think the Democrats will back off before it does?
Well, the first question, the Pentagon makes it sound as if it will happen almost immediately. I don't think there's any doubt that the troops on the front lines will have what they need. But there will be some other disruptions if the Pentagon is to be believed on this, and some of them are serious enough that they could cause even some layoffs of contract personnel and so on. So that's a possibility. The second thing that needs to be said about this, Chris, is that this whole debate has this era of unreality about it, at least on the Democratic side, because they keep talking about events in Iraq that do not comport with the reality on the ground over there. You hear it again and again. And you hear it in the attitude they have about, they're going to force troop withdrawals, impervious to the fact that troop withdrawals have already begun. It's happening. That seems to be unknown to them. And I think there's political peril for them in all of this. The American people don't like the Iraq War. They probably never will. But they're not rooting for us to lose. They don't seem invested in our losing the way the Democrats so often do. The Democrats are talking about the things they say are happening are not, and the things they say are not happening are. That's not a good position to be in.
You're making the case that troop withdrawals are starting now, but they're troop withdrawals given that a surge was put in place this year that took the troop levels to a new high. So it's not really much of a withdrawal at all. And what the Democrats are saying is it's time to get this war over with, which is what the American people are saying.
Well, all that may be so, Juan, but the fact is they seem impervious even to what is happening over there. You hear again and again that there's no light at the end of the tunnel, that nothing has changed. Palpably, something has changed very much.
Which is the military aspect, but do you believe that politically that we are any further along the way, Brit?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah? Why is that?
Well, because, for example, things are happening at ground level and at local levels that no one thought possible, which is one of the reasons why there was so much urgency in the calls for national reconciliation. The feeling was that if you could get national reconciliation, then the people at the lower levels and at the grassroots level in the country might knock off the insurgency. Well, it's happened at the local level, and the insurgency has subsided dramatically.
But there's nothing happening at the local level. In fact, General Odierno said just this week, you know what, unless we can get these Shiites who are in power to actually make some progress, to deliver services, to reach some reconciliation, then the surge and all the military progress will be for naught.
Let me bring something else into this.
Look, let's review what's happened. We've had remarkable developments on the ground. We've had the Anbar Awakening, which is essentially Sunnis giving up the insurgency and joining us. An amazing development nobody would ever have anticipated. Spreading in Baghdad, in Diyala, and elsewhere. You have al-Qaeda on the run, driven out of Anbar, out of Baghdad, and doesn't have a sanctuary anywhere. What you have is the Shiite extremists are not fighting, knowing that the American war machine, protected at its back because of the pacification of the Sunnis, could really crush them if they rise up against the United States, and they haven't. You even have Iranians pulling back with fewer IEDs and other attempts to undermine our war effort. All of this happening on the ground. Now, Odierno would like to cap all that with a political settlement. It's not going to happen. The Maliki government is hopeless, has been for a year. But if you look at the actual specifics of reconciliation, what's happening? Oil sharing, it's happening, in fact, even though in the absence of a law. The idea of federalism, yes, you don't have a law on it.
You have not had provincial elections, which is one of the things.
There are things that are lacking, but on the general reconciliation of that country, on the federalism issue, for example, it's already happened. Kurds are autonomous, the Sunnis are essentially autonomous, and the Shiites in the south are autonomous.
Well, that's a different solution, Charles.
Who cares how you end up where you want to end up?
Well, that's not up to us. That we don't need American people dying. We don't need to spend all our money there. If they're going to separate the country, let them do it. If you say al-Qaeda's done, look at what al-Qaeda seems to be regrouping in Pakistan.
In Pakistan, but look, If you defeat them in Iraq, you have achieved a signal victory. Even Osama bin Laden has gone on television and apologized over the behavior of his people in Iraq. He knows he's been defeated in Iraq, which he had declared the Central Front. If you have all of that happening and you have stability arriving in Iraq one way or the other, who cares how it happens?
So you're saying,
at the
Charles,
top
that
or
it
at
could
the
happen,
bottom?
despite all of the talk about benchmarks, it can happen from the bottom up instead of the top down.
Which is exactly what's happening. And it's the result that matters, not the means
Are
to
you
the end.
persuaded by that one?
No, I'm a little baffled because it seems to me that our result would be that we leave in such a way that the country remains stable and not a breeding ground for terrorists. In fact, there is no political stability. We have troops on the ground who have managed successfully to contain al-Qaeda at this point. But according to your prescription, keep the troops there, in fact, increase it, because at some point, if we begin to withdraw, and I think within 6 months as the election approaches, there's inevitably going to be a larger scale withdrawal, and as such, we will then open the gates again because there's no political progress.
I want to go back to
do one, and that happens. You ought to declare victory.
Was that what you think the Bush administration should do? Declare victory and come home?
I'm saying when the troops have come, when there's a substantial troop withdrawal, and the situation is as pacified as it is now, it's time for you to declare victory.
You're saying the American people should just say,
no,
go.
Why you hear me? I'm saying you.
Why me? I don't get that.
Because the things you've been calling for will largely been met.
You mean in terms of what?
In terms of the violence is down, troops are coming out, the war is winding down. Isn't that victory on your terms?
Well, you know what, we went in there, I think we went in there for weapons of mass destruction. We went in there to promote democracy. I'm looking at the terms of politics.
We've heard this before.
And the real question would be, have we, in fact, created some stability? That was Charles' point. Stability that allows us to say, we went to war and we achieved something.
I want to go back. I want to go back to the political issue with Mara, which is the Democrats are, at least for now, playing chicken, saying we're not going to approve this money, but you can get the money from other places. At some point, and we ran into this last spring when they cut off funding, and then the president vetoed it, and they ended up voting to fund it. At some point, the Democrats are going to have to decide: are we going to let the president continue his policy, or are we actually going to cut off the funding for the troops?
Well, first of all, they don't have the 67 votes that you would need to do that. But I don't think
they could just not pass anything.
That's right. I don't think they will, because they haven't in the past.
Look, if Democrats attempt to cut off a funding which squeezes the Pentagon and in any way impinges on the war effort, it's going to be political suicide on behalf of Democrats. If a president and Congress are in a fight over funding, as Clinton showed with Newt Gingrich, the president wins. And nobody would suspect that it's Bush who's holding back our funds on the troops. Democrats will suffer.
Thank you, panels.